Good morning, everyone. Hope you're having a fantastic day. It is Friday. We made it. We succeeded. We successfully made it to the end of the week. I feel like I got almost nothing done, but at the same time, I feel like I got everything done, so I guess I can't be too sad about that. I'm basically finished with the rough draft of excelling at online, or excelling in tough no limit hold'em games. Not sure of the title. We'll figure out the title. We don't have online in the title because that's kind of bad for marketing. Because even though online is more specific, and to be fair, like a lot of the content is from online poker, really it's about tough games. Like how to win when your opponents just don't make mistakes left and right? And that's a very different game than what a lot of live poker is. A lot of live poker is just really trying to maximally exploit your opponents, whereas a lot of online poker is making sure you can't get crushed by just like obvious strategies, right? And then also exploiting the opponents. You lost to a royal flush. Well, good. Sometimes you lose to royal flushes, such as life. Don't worry about what you lose to. Poker's all about minimizing losses and maximizing wins. Tough thing about royal flushes, you're usually on the line for a lot of money, right? Because like usually you'll have two pair or a set or a flush or something like that. It's kind of tough when you have two pair or a set or a flush. You're just going to lose money. It's a little bit different whenever you lose to quads, because if there are like three or two aces on the board and you don't have an ace, then well, you could be against the ace, right? Why aren't you at the European Poker Tour? Because I have a family. I have a wife and two kids. My birthday is coming up in about a week. One of my son's birthdays is in 6 days. Another son's birthday is in about a week and a half. It's holiday season. My parents are coming to visit. Some things are way more important than going to play a random EPT stop. Now, to be fair, EPT Prague is great. I've been there, I think, 5 or 6 times. And it's good. But as you get older in life and have more responsibilities, inevitably you must pick and choose. And the secret, I think, could be wrong, I'm still a little bit young to know the secret. The secret is to make sure you don't have to go play and you don't feel the urge to go play. I mean, even, 4 or 5 years ago, I would, feel bad if I did not go play every EPT or every WPT or every World Series event, right? I would feel bad. I'd feel like I was missing out. I had FOMO, fear of missing out. But now, realize it just doesn't matter. There's poker tournaments all the time. And you can play whichever ones you want, right? So, my next tournament stop is going to be to Nottingham for the Party Poker Millions. I think it's a $5 million guarantee, $10,000 buy-in. They also have a 1K and a 2K and a 5K and a 25K. So you can load up all sorts of action there. And I already have money in my Party Poker account, so it's nice and easy. I just go there, show up. Hopefully don't empty the account. Hopefully reload the account with everybody else's money. Today we have a question that we talk about very, very frequently. Well, actually, we don't talk about it frequently, but somehow I get asked about it frequently, right? The question is, pot odds. What are pot odds? How do we calculate pot odds? Which is actually kind of a basic thing. I hope most of you know that, but we'll go through it very briefly. But also, implied odds. Implied odds are actually shockingly tough. And a lot of people think they're easy, or think that it's not all that difficult. But actually, implied odds are kind of difficult to figure out. So, first things first, recognize pot odds are important to some extent. If you are watching on Instagram, you're not going to be able to see this little presentation I have pulled up that I made 1 minute ago on Microsoft Word. But if you're watching on YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Facebook, any of those places, you should be able to see this. Here are pot odds. Pot odds are the way you figure out pot odds, which means how often you need to win going to the next card, assuming the hand is just over, right? Which is usually not. But you take your pot odds equal the bet divided by your call plus your opponent's bet plus the pot. Okay? Pot odds are bet divided by your call plus your opponent's bet plus the pot. So, when you're facing a $100 bet into a $100 pot, right? Your opponent bets pot. The equation would be 100 divided by 100 plus 100 plus 100 in parentheses, which is 33%. So, when you're facing a pot-sized bet, you need to win 33% of the time to justify calling. Many players incorrectly forget to put in your call. Your call here, that call amount is highly, highly, highly important. Because otherwise it'd be 50%, and 50% is just wrong. You can get out a deck of cards and some chips and play around with this to see that it is true. Let's say you're facing a small bet, a 33% pot bet. Now we have 33 divided by 33 plus 100, which is 20%. So facing a smaller bet, you need to win way less often than when facing a big bet, right? What about facing a 200% pot bet, right? 2 times pot. Doesn't happen all that often in small stakes games, but it does in high stakes games sometimes. And I guess I suppose against very weak players. Facing that bet is 200 divided by 200 plus 100 pot, which equals 40%. So that's pot odds. Nice and simple. It's just a straight equation. Nothing fancy, right? I remind you more of your grandfather every day. That sounds about right. I get closer to his age every day in theory. Draw odds minus pot odds times bet. I don't know what you're saying about that. Should you do the seniors event in 2020? Do whatever you want, right? It's very important to figure out what you want in life. And if you want to play the seniors tournament, go play the seniors tournament. Realize, though, that the seniors tournament is going to have 5,000 people. And it's really hard to win a tournament with 5,000 people. So if you care about variance, then no, definitely not. But if you care about winning a bracelet, then sure. Do you ever bluff? Yes. Probably overbluff. All right, so those are pot odds, and that is relatively basic. Let's talk about implied odds now. And look, pot odds really are just an equation. There's nothing fancy about this. On the river, if you're facing an all-in, or on the turn if you're facing an all-in, and there's one more card to come, right? Say you're all in and you have a flush draw. Your opponent goes all in, you have a flush draw. No other outs. There's no more betting. The hand's over. Pot odds are the only thing that matter here. And your opponent's range composition. So in this scenario, if you think you're just dead unless you make a flush, let's say you have the nut low flush draw and you know your opponent has top pair, top kicker, right? Which you'll never know, which is why even kind of pot odds get a little bit dicey. In that scenario, you're going to get there about 18% of the time on the river. How do we get 18%? Well, there's about 9 flush cards remaining, roughly, depending on the scenario. There are, 45 cards remaining in the deck, something like that. 9 divided by 45 is 20%. It's actually 18%. Whatever, it's roughly that. So, if you're getting pot odds, like say your opponent bets pot and you have a flush draw, they're all in on the river for pot, or if they're all in on the turn for pot, God, I'm already screwing this up left and right, you should fold, right? Because you need to win 33% of the time, but you're only going to win about 20% of the time. But if your opponent bets tiny, say they bet 1/10 pot all in, now it's 1 divided by 1 plus 1 plus 10. So you need to win 1/12 of the time. Obviously, you're going to win way more than 1/12 of the time, right? So you see, the bet size will determine whether or not you get to continue, especially when you are all in. This also matters on the river, for example. Say on the river, your opponent makes a bet. Let's say they bet pot, right? And you have a bluff catcher. Say you have top pair bad kicker. You think your opponent will only bet with nut hands and garbage with a polarized range, which often they should. In that scenario, you want to ask what percentage of my opponent's range is nut hands and what percentage of my opponent's range is garbage hands. Now in some scenarios, like say all the flush draws and all the straight draws hit, your opponent's range may be literally 0% bluffs or very close to 0% bluffs just because they don't even have any in their range, right? When all the draws miss, though, your opponents may have a lot of bluffs. Maybe they bluff every single busted draw, which could be 40% of their range, 50% of their range if they're not well aware of what their range composition is, right? So on the river, pot odds matter too. And in general, not always, but in general, when you're getting better odds, you should call more frequently, just because you're getting better odds. Now, some players will set up the pot odds such that you are getting good odds at a particular point or getting bad odds at a particular point to try to induce a call or a fold, but you have to figure that out from player to player. Which is better, Flopzilla or Equilab? They're different. Turns out a lot of programs are different. All right, next. Okay, that's what pot odds are. Not a whole lot to say about that. Implied odds, though. Implied odds are very important, and this is where a lot of guessing comes into play, and maybe not even necessarily guessing, but in-depth analysis. So pot odds essentially account for how much you can win on the next betting round. Okay, so as an example, opponent bets pot and you have a flush draw. All right, your pot odds are 33% because we just solved that with pot odds. But you'll make the flush about 18% of the time on the next card. So say on the turn, They bet pot, you have a flush draw. Should you call? Well, it depends on how much more money is left to be bet and how much of that money is likely to actually go into the pot when you hit. And, one more thing that people forget, how often do you win the pot when you miss by bluffing? So, essentially, you need to get additional money in the pot, or you need to be able to win the pot a large frequency of the time, or some frequency of the time when you miss. So in this case, you need to be getting about 4.2 to 1 pot odds. So for simplicity, let's call it 4 to 1 pot odds. You may say, why 4 to 1? All right, the way you convert odds to percentage is you take this number here on the back end, the 1, divided by 1 plus 4. So divided by both numbers. So 1 divided by 1 plus 4 is 20%. That's how you convert odds to percentages. So in this case, you need to get paid off as if you will hit about 20% of the time. Okay? So, how many more pot size bets do you need to get in on the river on average when you hit? Well, right now, we're getting 2 to 1, right? Because we win our opponent's bet plus the pot. Right? So that's 2 to our 1. And then, on the river, we need 2 more to go in so that we're getting 4 to 1. 1, 2, 2 immediately, 2 later gives us 4 to our 1. All right? So, you need 2 more pot size bets. Now, a pot size bet is the pot size bet on the turn, not river pot size bets. You need 2 more turn pot size bets. And in this scenario, say your opponent bets pot on the turn and you call, that will be a 2/3 pot bet on the river is what you need to get in, right? That makes sense? Yeah, that makes sense. So, you need to get essentially one more reasonable bet in on the river when you get there, on average. Now, sometimes you're going to get none. Say you do have a flush draw, and the flush draw comes, and your opponent just had nothing, and they just check fold. Well, you got none, right? Say your opponent say you have the nut flush, and your opponent makes a second nut flush, for whatever reason. Now, when you miss, you get a lot, right? They're going to bet the river, you're going to jam or raise, and you're going to get paid. But all this implies that you have stacks left to bet, right? If your opponent only has a half pot bet left going to the river, you are never getting the right implied odds, right? Because, like I just said, you needed a 2/3 pot size bet to go in on the river. But if they only have a 50% pot bet going to the river, you need to be folding your flush draw, which is unfortunate. You don't want to be folding flush draws. And this is why it's important to think ahead throughout the hand and structure bet sizes such you get to stick around. And if you're playing well, very often you will play the hand in such a manner that you're almost always getting the right odds. That's what all of you are saying pertaining to this. All of you enjoy the seniors event? Yeah, get in there and play. You might as well go play the seniors tournament. Finally, your time zone's meshed up. What's the topic? You're late. You're 15 minutes late. We're discussing pot odds and, more importantly, implied odds. And we're almost done because it's not that big of a topic. All right. Realize you don't always get paid when you hit. This is very, 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 very important. Maximally important, right? Because if you have a draw that is the very obvious draw, like say you have, just an obvious flush draw, right? Say the board is 9-4-2, 2 spades. Your opponent bets the flop, you call. Turns a blank, your opponent bets, you call. Like, you either have a 9, it's probably going to fold out on a lot of rivers for top pair, or a pair that's going to fold out on a lot of rivers, or you have a flush draw. And if the flush draw comes in, your opponent may check fold a lot. This is where it depends on their range and their strategy, right? If their range contains a whole lot of junk that will just check and give up the river, it's not necessarily good, right? Because you're not getting paid, assuming you lose to all the junk. And to be fair, their junk may be stuff like pocket 6s on 9-4-2-7 that just bets for no good reason, right? So you need to figure out what your opponent's strategy is and realize you won't always get paid. Sometimes all the draws will come in. Like, say your opponent has pocket queens, right? And the flop comes jack 10, 3, 2 hearts. They bet the flop, you call, turns a 2. They bet the turn, you call. River is the ace of hearts. And they're sitting there with pocket queens, no heart, and you have, notice king queen got there, right? I guess, what I said before was jack 10 blank. Queen 9 misses, but they block it. All the flush draws got there, right? So in that scenario, a lot of stuff gets there. So when a lot of stuff gets there, When they check the river, they're just check folding. Because realize they have a lot of good hands in their range too. They have sets they can easily call with. They have flushes they can easily call with. So queens there is very near the bottom of the range. Despite the blockers, they still lose. They don't block the queen of hearts, right? You need to block queen of hearts there in order to make some sort of hero call. So in that situation, your opponent should be folding a ton. So you're just not getting paid when you hit, which means you're not getting your full implied odds. So you always want to be asking this. Something else you want to consider is that you don't always lose when you miss. Very, very important too. Say you do have queen 9 on that jack 10 blank board. Your opponent bets the flop, you call. They bet again on the turn, you call. When the river's that ace of hearts, when your opponent checks, you actually win that pot a lot. And you should be bluffing probably close to every time, especially if you have the queen of hearts in your hand, because you block the flushes, right? So that's a scenario where now you actually win the pot sometimes when you miss. So these two things here are very, very difficult to accurately figure out. But I think what a lot of people do wrong is they drastically overestimate their implied odds. They see going to the river, like say your opponent bets the turn, their opponent bets the turn for pot, and then they have 15 pot-sized bets remaining. A lot of people think, all right, if I get there, I'm winning all of that money. But you're not. You're going to win like one bet or maybe 2 bets. So at most, for the most part, at most, you're going to get about 3 pot-sized river bets on the turn, which usually works out to, what did we decide already? To like 6 turn bets, roughly. At most, you're going to be getting about 6-1 implied odds. Because if they bet the river and you raise, they're either going to call or fold, right? So you either get their like 2/3 pot river bet, or you get your bet plus their bet plus your raise. So at most, you're getting like 6-1 going to the river. You're never getting some gigantic implied odds where your opponent bets $30 into the $30 pot and they have 1,000 behind. You're not going to stack them for 1,000. Almost never. Unless somehow you have the nuts and they have second nuts, which just doesn't happen all that often. So recognize that, right? You are not always going to get paid. Now, the other concept that's very important is you don't always lose when you miss, right? And you're going to find that this allows players to call with draws that are getting nowhere near the right odds. For example, on the flop. Say early position raises, you call with jack 10 of spades. Flop comes 8-7-3, giving you a gut shot. Gut shot and 2 overcards. Your opponent bets pot. Well, if you assume your jack and your 10 are good, you have 10 outs, right? Which means you're going to get there on the next card about 20% of the time, a little bit less, right? 10 divided by 45. Is that right? Something like that. So, about 20% of the time. A little bit less. So if your opponent bets... My brain's not working. 1 second. It's too early for me. I need a little bit of coffee. Roughly 20%. Let's just stick with that so we have nice, easy numbers. All right. When your opponent bets the flop, you're not getting the right odds to call. But on 8-7-3, first off, if you get a 9, they're not going to think, my opponent clearly has jack 10, right? And if they do have a hand like aces or a set, you're just going to get paid a lot, right? So you have big implied odds there because we're on the flop, right? You can call, you get a turn bet in and you get a river bet in. So there, let's say you're drawing purely to the 9 to make straight. You're going to get there 4 divided by 45, so 1 in 10 times, 1 in 11 times, right? So you're going to get 11-1 or 12-1 pot odds, but you're only getting 2-1. 12-1 is nowhere near 2-1, but can you get an additional 10 flop pot size bets in? Well, the answer is yes. You can get 3 or 4 in on the turn, and you can get 10 to 15 in on the river. So that's like 20, right? And that's assuming your opponent just check calls. If your opponent has a set or aces, they're going to bet. Maybe you raise and they still pay you, right? So you can get in 50 flop pot size bets. Same thing on the turn. There are a lot of scenarios where, say it is 8-7-3, 2 hearts. You have jack 10 with backdoor flush draw. Say it's 8-7-3, 2 hearts, 1 spade. You have jack 10 spades. They bet the flop, you call. Let's say they bet again on the turn. You can actually still call there a lot. You're getting nowhere near the right odds. But now, when you get a 9, you still win. When you get a jack or a 10, it's actually kind of dicey because sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, but it's probably going to roughly break even. And then when a heart comes, when the other draw that you don't have comes in, you actually get paid there too. Also, on 8-7-3, if the river is a 6, making the obvious open-ended straight draw get there, you may be able to win there too. Because all the other draws got there. When all the other draws get there, you should be bluffing with the draws that do not get there. Especially if your opponents are capable of folding. Like, some people are just never ever folding. But in scenarios like that, it's important to realize that you don't necessarily have to get there to win. All right, let's see what all of you are saying. 76 people and 10 likes. Come on, people. Click like, click subscribe, share it with your friends. That goes a long way to helping me. Let's see. If you're watching on Instagram, sorry you can't see the chat. Head on over to youtube.com/pokercoaching to watch this live. We're going to be in Vegas for Super Bowl weekend. Probably not. Let's see. All of you want coffee. I actually have coffee and I have white tea going here today. But it's kind of cold, so I made coffee last second. Everything got done last second this morning. Sorry again for the very cobbled together little coffee episode, but it is what it is. What's the longest time you've run bad in live poker? I don't know. I don't even think about stuff like this because it just doesn't matter. So how long have I ran bad in live poker? I think biggest downswing was like 300K over about a year, I guess. Something like that. 300K over a year, something like that. We need 500 more subscribers to hit 40K. Well, Kevin, go get them. Let's get 500 more people to click a subscribe button. It's completely free for them to help out Jonathan Little. We've actually been getting YouTube subscribers kind of quickly, which is kind of neat. It means we're actually making an impact and people are enjoying it. This is black tea right here. Or this is not black tea. This is coffee. This is black coffee. Over here is white tea. White tea is, kind of more like green tea, but it has a different flavor. I actually like white tea a lot. It's kind of expensive. I don't know why. But I enjoy it. It's probably expensive because it tastes better. It probably takes literally no much more work than regular green tea, but it is what it is. All right. You're taking your son to his first tournament on Saturday. He just turned 18 and has been studying my videos. Awesome. Hope he has a great time. The Stone Canadian says, I helped you come in second in a tournament with 550 players. Congrats. Completion's having coffee with me. Very nice. One time I was at Bellagio playing 10-20 no limit. This must have been, 10 years ago. And a dad came and bought his son in for $2,000 into a 10-20 game. $2,000, okay? He sits down. Dad plays perfectly fine. The kid played horribly. He was literally the worst player I got to play with all year in the 10-20 game. And he lasted about 20 minutes, just straight up giving it away. And the dad was just kind of sitting over there like, oh my God. Oh gosh. It was very funny. He was not very good. So make sure your son's actually okay. It sounds like he studied a little bit, so he can't be that bad. Do I think a 5-5 game with 10% rake is beatable? Depends on if they cap it or not. Is it capped at like $5? Capped at $5 is probably beatable. Uncapped, definitely not. 10% rake uncapped is not beatable. 5% rake uncapped is probably not beatable. How do you handle trap players on orphan pot? I mean, what are these words like orphan pots? There are no orphan pots. If people are good, they check with good hands, even multi-way. So how do you handle that? Don't just blindly bet when they check to you. To be fair, easy way to beat small stakes games is to bet when they check. People are going to fold too often. But against good players are going to be checking with their marginal made hands and then calling at somewhere near the minimum defense frequency, which means when they check, their checks don't indicate weakness. Very important concept to realize. And if your opponents realize that let me get my thought together. If your opponent realizes, if I realize, for example, that you will bluff every time I check, guess what strategy we're going to start using? We're going to be betting with all of our bluffs and winning pots and checking with all of our nut hands and all of our marginal made hands and all of our bad made hands. They can easily check and then call. So against someone who just bets every time that you check to them, they are incredibly easy to beat. Now, There's going to be a lot of variance against these players because you're check calling with top pair bad kicker and middle pair bad kicker and ace high and whatnot. But that's okay, right? It's okay to bluff catch a lot if your opponent's drastically over bluffing. Range composition is very important, and if all you have to do to crush your opponent is to check, and your opponent will bet, life's easy. Just don't fold anything decent. Like ace high better, just always find a call on most boards. You didn't know I had a Twitch channel. To be fair, I don't stream on Twitch much at all besides a little coffee. We actually did a 24-hour marathon on Twitch over the course of Thanksgiving. I know a lot of you tuned in for that. Hope you enjoyed it. Where I showed some of the content from Poker Coaching and Poker Coaching Premium for one day only. We may do more of that in the future. We're actually kicking around the idea of having a 24/7 channel. Turns out I have about 3,000 hours of content that I've made over the last, call it 5 or 6 years. We have a bunch of older stuff too, but we tend to not release the older stuff much anymore. Unless it's not time sensitive at all, and it was good and accurate, which most of it was. But anyway, and I typically we're considering making a 24-hour stream. We'll figure it out. Don't forget Wine Drunk streaming on Hearthstone. Yes, that happened a time or two, and that was a mistake. What is a blocker? A blocker is a card that makes it harder for your opponent to have a particular hand, or impossible for your opponent to have a particular hand. For example, on Jack 10-3, 2 hearts, if you have the Queen of Hearts, and the Ace of Hearts comes on the river, your opponent can't have, your opponent cannot have King, Queen of Hearts, and Queen, 9 of Hearts, and Queen, 8 of Hearts, right? So having that Queen of Hearts in your hands makes it to where your opponents can't have a particular hand. And very often you'll find that blockers do matter. Pre-flop, even blockers matter, right? For example, if someone raises from the middle position and you're on the button with like ace-8 offsuit, you should definitely either fold, usually, or 3-bet as a bluff. Why are you 3-betting the ace-8 offsuit? Because the ace makes it harder for the opponent to have aces, ace, king, ace, queen, ace, jack, right? That ace in your hand, right? So if there are normally 6 combinations of aces, if you have the ace of spades in your hand, 3 of them go away. So we're left with only 3 combinations remaining. So that means when you have an ace in your hand, the pre-flop raiser, or anybody, is 50% less likely to have aces. And then they're 25% less likely to have ace-king, right? Because there are ace-king of spades, ace of spades, king of hearts, ace of spades, king of diamonds, ace of spades, king of clubs, right? So that is, it makes it to where your opponent's 25% less likely to have ace-king and ace-queen and ace-jack, which means their opening range will generally be weaker, right? And if their range is weaker, you get to bluff a little bit more often. All right, you enjoyed the Hold'em X stream. Yeah, there was a game that was made a while back called Hold'em X. I was apparently decent at it, but I don't think the game was actually all that hard. Are any more Black Friday sales coming up? We'll probably do some sort of holiday sale coming up in the near future. Have I been playing the new Hearthstone set at all? Very little. There are a few people who I presume give very clean information and good information on good decks to play. What's the guy's name? I can't remember. There's a guy who plays Rogue all the time. He made #1 yesterday. He was just like good. He only plays Rogue decks apparently, and he like always makes top 100 legend, and he's already #1 this month. He had a good Death Rattle Rogue list. It was like I just haven't lost with it, so that's good. To be fair, I haven't lost with it means I've won 10 games. It doesn't mean like I played 1,000 games and lost 0. Run It Up has a 24/7 channel that's all old tournaments. Good. Wouldn't be competing stuff, right? Similar, but different. What does ROI stand for? ROI stands for return on investment. How much money do you make every time you buy in? Counting rake and whatnot. So let's say you play a $100 tournament. Let's say you play 100 of them. Got the calculator. Oh, well, the person who asked this is on Instagram, but you can't see the calculator. All right, let's say we play $100 tournaments, okay? Let's say they're actually $120, because I know a lot of places have rake, right? So $120 times 100. So we played 100 games. That is $12,000 in buy-ins. Let's say we cashed for $20,000. That's what we cash for. So we do 20,000 divided by the buy-in, right? Which equals 1.66666%. So that means we have 67% return on investment over that sample. Now, 100 tournaments actually is not a representative sample, and it's small. So you're going to have big swings. There's actually a site called pokerdope.com that has a variance calculator. You can see that variance is insane. And over 100 games, you're going to have some samples that are up a ton, some that are down a ton, right? That's just how it works. So that's the return on investment. Notice, though, that if you buy in for 12,000, but you only cash for 10,000, which is what the, in theory, average player will do. Not exactly right, but something like that. You see you have 0.83%, which means, subtract that from 100%, it means you're losing the rake, 17% rake, right? And that's quite bad. So that's what return on investment is. Return on investment lets you know how much money you expect to make on average. This number becomes very important when you become a professional, because you have to figure out which events should I play. And you have to get really good at estimating return on investments, right? So, for example, there's a $25,000 tournament in Nottingham in a month that I may or may not play. I don't think there's a guarantee on it. I'm going to show up, look at it. If the game looks soft, I'll play it, because I expect the ROI to be 20-ish% on a soft tournament. So, 25,000 times 0.2 means I'm going to make $5,000 playing that tournament, right? Which is good. But let's say instead the ROI is 2%, because the game's tough, means I'm going to make $500 playing that tournament, and I'm going to have loads of variance. So you see that if I have $5,000 win rate, there's going to be less variance in general, and I'm just going to make way more money. And if I'm making $500 a day, I might as well just go sit at home and read a book, right? Because that's going to work out to like, whatever, $20 an hour over the course of a 2-day tournament. So understanding and estimating ROIs is very, 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 very important. And you need to account for travel expenses too, right? Good example is I'm going to Nottingham, right? I think I'm going to play, let's see what my schedule says. It says 5, 6, 7, 17, 18, 28, 38, 40K. So we're going to play about 40K in tournaments, okay? 40,000 in tournaments. Let's say across the board, these are all 10Ks and lower. And the 10Ks should presumably be soft. Let's say we have 30% ROI out the door. It's $12,000, right? So we have $12,000 in perceived profit. Divided by, well, $12,000 over the course of the trip, right? So now we have to subtract expenses. Let's say expenses are $2,000. So now we're going to make $10,000 in the week. Okay? Sounds good, but let's say we divide that by 7 days. We're making $1,428 per day. Still sounds pretty good, right? And that's why I'm going to play it. Let's instead take a $1,500 tournament in America that I'm going to have 100% ROI in. So I'm going to make 1,500 times 100% is 1,500. But let's say now I have to pay $500 to get there, for getting there and hotel and all that. So I'm making $1,000 in, let's say, 3 days, right? Because you have to go there, you have to play it, maybe make day 2, who knows? 3 days on average. That means we're making $333 per day. So when people ask me, why aren't you going to go play the random World Series circuit event? The answer is because you just don't make all that much money doing that. You make $333 a day. That's probably about the cap. And that's assuming you're great, right? That's assuming you have 100% ROI. Maybe that's not even realistic anymore. I don't know. Haven't played them. Our angle sure makes it look like you can play that. So in that scenario, it's just not worth it for me to get up and go play. I can sit here and write a book and make an article and make a little coffee and make more money than that. So it doesn't make sense, right? I have a video article on travel rake. Go to jonathanlittlepoker.com/travel rake to check that out. How do you figure you make 10K? The Handsome Magician says pay more attention. I'll show you one more time. We're going to play $40,000 in tournaments when I go to Nottingham in a month. I'm going to play 40K in tournaments roughly. Maybe it's a little bit more, maybe it's a little bit less. Let's call it 40K. You have to work on averages here. Times 30% return on investment. That's $12,000. $40,000 in buy-ins in Nottingham times 30% ROI across the board. Some's going to be a little bit higher, some's going to be a little bit lower, but that's probably about right for $10,000 buy-in tournaments. It's $12,000 minus travel expenses, $2,000. Maybe it's actually $3,000, whatever it is. Let's say minus $2,000. Now we have $10,000 in profit over the course of the week. So that's it. Love to write one. What are you going to write? It says, you really helped you so much. You always quote me to people who are struggling with running bad. Well, thank you. James is loving it too. James L. Is this my son? James Little? James, you're supposed to be in school right now. Please go back to school and hang out with the teacher. I have a son named James, and his last name happens to be Little. So that's it. You don't know how you made a living traveling the circuit with only 20% ROI. Well, I don't either. But also, volume is very important. Volume is very, 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 very important. You couldn't... Poker Coaching Premium really puts you on another level. Well, that's the whole goal. Check it out. pokercoaching.com/premium if you want to get good at poker. That is a nice, clean, easy way to do it. How do you manage note-taking? Go to jonathanlittlepoker.com/notes. James L. How did you figure your 30% ROI? That is the good question. And the answer is data. Lots and lots of data. I know how I have done in tournaments, historically, and I know how people who play comparably, in my opinion, do in tournaments. Turns out my ROI has actually been much higher in these tournaments, probably because I've been a little bit lucky. And I realize that, right? It's important to realize you have been lucky. My ROI out the door is something like 100% in 10Ks, but that's clearly not right. I have been lucky. I mean, look at all the trophies back here, right? I ran hot. Or maybe I'm good. Maybe I'm just a sicko. I don't know. But I presume, and I think for gamblers, it's always smart to presume that you are way worse than your past results indicate. Because you could just be running hot. And it's important to realize that, right? If you go into any situation assuming that past results indicate future results, you're just going to get demolished in all aspects of life. It'd be cool to have a course on blockers. Check out pokercoaching.com/premium. In the Cash Game Masterclass, there's a whole section on blockers. Should you bluff the river by going all in? Sure. If you risk busting, maybe. Or just give up and get a certain cash. Depends on how likely they're going to fold, right? All depends on range composition. You're a sicko and good. Well, I do my best. Is it better to seek the fish or to sit behind the fish or sit behind the aggressor? Usually the fish. That said, you really do not want deep stacks on your left, and you really do not want aggressive players on your left, but you really want position on the bad players. I mean, I suppose in the ideal world, like if the fish is kind of like loose and passive and splashy, you don't mind them being on your left. So in that case, maybe sit to the right of the aggressor, to the left, or have the fish on the give fish position on you. But that's my thoughts on that. Let's be honest, James would learn a lot more on this stream than he would from school. James actually knows a whole lot of stuff. He was FaceTiming with my parents yesterday, and they're like, sing us a song. And then he just like starts rattling off like 10 different songs he learned at school. It was good. They're like, sing Jingle Bells. He's like, oh, I know Jingle Bells. And he sang Jingle Bells. I've never sang Jingle Bells to him in my life, but he knows Jingle Bells. Are we doing an Ask Me Anything anytime soon? I don't know. I was going to do it today, but then I realized pot odds were an easy enough topic to do that I could rattle together in 1 minute. Ask the questions, feel free. All right, Monty says, 40 big blinds effective. Hero has an open-ended straight draw. Villain has top 2 pair pots. 15 big blinds. Villain donk bets all in. You have pocket jacks on king, queen, 10. Well, it's just a pot odds question, right? Should you call? Depends on your odds. Monty, we already covered this. Monty, come on. Where do my pot odds go? Here we go. Here are pot odds right here for you. Pot odds equal bet divided by your call plus your opponent's bet plus the pot. How often are you going to get there? Do the math, right? You're going to get there, what, 35% of the time? You don't know your opponent has king 10, by the way. They could have a set. They could have top pair. Because right here, some of your outs you still lose sometimes when you get there, right? So that's a straight math question, and you should never, after watching this video, this a little coffee episode, have to ask me this math question again. And please understand, math questions do not require you to ask anyone for help once you know the formula. And here it is. It's not even a hard formula. The bet, whatever the bet was, let's say they potted it, divided by your call, which is pot, plus your opponent's bet, which is pot, plus the pot, which is pot. So here's our equation right here. You're going to get there 33% of the time, right? I'm sorry, how often are you going to get there? You're going to get there about 35%. You need to get there 33%. So in a cash game with no payout implications whatsoever, easy call. Easy call. In a tournament, it becomes closer because then you have to worry about payout implications because we don't know where you are in the tournament. What does a sicko really mean in poker? Well, someone who's way better than everybody else. It's going to sound egotistical, but I mean, like, there's so often when I'm playing poker and I'm watching a presumably good player play, and they're playing against usually a recreational player, and I can just like look and tell the recreational player has it. It's just like obvious to me. And then I see the good player like call with a losing hand. I'm like, what are you calling with? It just doesn't make sense. Yet they're still calling. So like, I think a lot of people who have a solid win rate do things differently, right? And the sickos, the actual best players in the world, are really good at everything. The best players in the world are good at GTO. They're good at exploitative play. They're good at reads. They're good at tells, right? They're good at things. They're good at everything, right? And if you're good at everything, that's how you become a sicko. Whereas I think most, probably people like myself, may be good at like 4 out of 5 things, right? I'm not the best player in the world. I get that. And then, people who win at like 10% ROI, they're good at 2 out of 5 things. And that's an oversimplification, but it's something like that. What is a capped range? A capped range is a range that doesn't contain many nut hands. So why would it not contain many nut hands? Because people would, quote unquote, always raise with the nut hands, right? So for example, let's say middle position raises, deep stacked, and you call on the button, okay? Most players, in most scenarios, 3-bet aces and kings and queens and ace-king every time, right? So that means they probably don't have aces and kings and queens and ace-king. So in theory, they are already capped at jacks and better, or jacks and worse, and, whatever, ace-queen and worse, something like that. Now, that's actually called a condensed range because they don't have garbage in their range either, right? They don't have like 9-4 offsuit. So that's a condensed range. On the flop, a lot of scenarios come up where your opponent bets and you just call in a scenario where you would want to raise with all of your best hands. So, for example, on Jack 10-3, 2 hearts, when your opponent bets the flop and you just call, you are capped at, ace-jack and worse, right? Because you would raise, you don't have queens because you would have 3-bet it pre-flop, right? Same scenario, like middle position calls, you raises, you call button. You'd raise with queens pre-flop, so you don't have that. You would raise jacks and 10s on Jack 10-3, 2 hearts, right? You'd raise Jack 10, so you don't have any sets, you don't have any 2-pair. But your opponent would raise pre-flop with jacks, and they would bet the flop with jacks. So they still get to have jacks, right? So that's a scenario where when you do just call, you probably don't have a whole lot of nut hands. So in that scenario, you are capped at that, which means if the turn is like a 4, Jack 10-3, 4, and your opponent has, let's say, pocket aces, they're pretty clean just to keep value betting, right? Because they have the best hand almost every time. Been watching my stuff about 70% way through excelling at No Limit Hold'em. Awesome. Hope you're enjoying it. Do you think Poker Go would go for a low stakes entry for people from coaching sites? Kevin, I'm not sure what you're asking. What is the main point or purpose to focus on when you're developing a strategy plan? Where should you start? I would tell you to check out the Cash Game Masterclass, which could be appropriately titled No Limit Hold'em Masterclass. It doesn't discuss ICM, like payout implications, doesn't discuss that at all. But check out that. I think range analysis, range composition is highly important. You need to know which ranges to play from all situations, and you need to know how ranges interact with each other on various boards. If you can get that, I mean, you're in pretty decent shape. And David said things like, I would think we need to start with position. Yeah, but that's very simplistic, right? Like, you can teach somebody position in 1 minute. I mean, here I'm going to do it. When you're in position, you get to play more hands than when you're out of position. When you're in position, you get to put in additional bets. That's pretty much it. Overly simplistic, clearly, but that's not that big of a topic, right? Like pot odds, right? We covered pot odds in 10 minutes here today. We covered implied odds decently enough in like another 10 minutes, right? Like that's not really studying poker if you study poker for 30 minutes, right? But no, the idea of how does my range compare to my opponent's ranges and what do I do because of that is highly important. I see. Should we broadcast a table of poker players with you and others analyzing our play? I don't know. I think I'd be more likely to get someone like Best Bet Jacksonville or Poker Night in America, someone like that, to let me essentially rent their stream for the day and let me rent their stream for the day, have my students play on it, and then I can commentate over it. I think that would be much more probable. Maybe we've already talked to them about this. Let's see. Why do we fold small pairs under the gun? When you have the same odds as making a set as pocket nines and eights. Think about it for a second, David. I bet you'll figure it out. Reason is because with nines, you're way less likely to get set over set than when you have twos. And also, when you have nines, you are way more likely to flop an overpair. When you flop an overpair, it's like pretty good. When you flop second pair, it's pretty good. But twos on basically any board is never great. So let's say you raise with twos under the gun, big blind calls, or anyone calls, button, whoever. Flop comes anything without a two. You have a hand that is, maybe best, but has almost no potential to improve. So if you check it down, you just let your opponent realize loads of equity, which is not great. If you bet and get called, you're almost dead, which is not great. So you really just don't want to be in that scenario. So sidestep it by not playing those hands pre-flop. Have you spent much time with solvers? Yes. I actually outsource most of the solver work. I have a book that I published. Modern Poker Theory. The author, Michael Acevedo, now a coach at pokercoaching.com. Check out his content. He did a webinar yesterday where you can get online, ask him questions in real time. He wrote Modern Poker Theory. I helped get it published. I was asked by my publishing partners, who is the best person to write a book on poker theory? And the answer is Michael Acevedo. He helped design PioSolver, by the way. And he wrote this book. I helped clean it up. It is great. It's like probably the best high-level poker book. Get in there, book. All those books back there, I had a hand in making. So it's a lot of work. It's a nice-looking book. It is a nice-looking book. You've been curious about getting into poker and you don't want to lose any money. You've been practicing on play money apps. I would tell you to put like $50 or 50 pounds or wherever into a online site and play tiny, 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 tiny stakes. People play differently for fake money, etc. How much of that 35 could you expect to keep? Well, look, I mean, like your win rate in play money games is completely irrelevant. It's honestly completely irrelevant. You need to be playing where people are playing for real. Hold up the book for 2 seconds. It's called Modern Poker Theory. Write it down. Send yourself an email. Soup says, you won a tournament earlier today. Congrats. You're enjoying the content. I'm glad to hear it. Do you have any tips to prevent it from becoming an addiction? To prevent poker from becoming an addiction? I mean, you have to first ask yourself, are you prone to gambling for reasons besides making money? Now, when I say making money, producing equity, right? Like if you go and play a slot machine and you don't like study it or whatnot, then you're just a degenerate gambler. If you're a degenerate gambler, you need to go get help with being a degenerate gambler. Easiest way to do that is to recognize every time I go and put money in this machine, I lose money on average. If you can actually rationalize that and think about that. And same thing in poker, right? Every time you play poorly in poker, you give your money away. Do you want to give your money away? Because that is actually what you are doing. Whenever you play a game that is negative EV, you're giving your money away, right? Same reason I don't go play the tough 25K, right? because I probably have a break-even ROI or negative 1% ROI. Do I want to give away my day? No. Do I want to give away a little bit of money for an experience? Not really. So understand it's bad. Now, every time you put money in the machine, say you go play roulette or whatever, every time you bet, you lose 5 cents or 10 cents. Doesn't sound like a lot. Every time you bet $5. Doesn't sound like a lot, but it actually does add up over time. And basically, you just have to insert logic, right? Because in your brain, where your brain works is you have the logical side and the illogical side. You have your conscious and your subconscious. Your conscious can be telling you, your conscience, the side of your brain that you actually think is saying, I do not want to gamble. I do not want to lose my money. I really do not want to do that. But you have been trained and conditioned subconsciously to the point where your subconscious brain says, I can go play slot machines and get lucky and win a jackpot and change my life. And they're at battle. They're at war with each other. If you have a gambling problem or any addiction at all, you have two different sides of your brain that are competing. And you need to get them on the same page. So the way you get your subconscious on the same page as your logical mind is to insert logic in every single reason you would want to be a problem gambler. Every single reason you'd want to go, play slot machines or bet sports or whatever, anything that you're losing at. Insert logic. You have to be rational and realize, look, every time I bet this, I'm losing money. Even though I'm going to have swings. And that's it. If you're a losing poker player, you might as well be playing the slot machines, right? And do you want to give away all your money? The answer is no. Obviously, I'm not a psychologist or anything, but I think it's important to recognize that. Oh, let's see. What adjustment should you make for tournaments with no antes? Play a whole lot tighter. Let's see. What do I think about the online apps that operate illegally within America? I certainly wouldn't put money there. Are you still playing cash games? What about PLO? I don't play a ton of cash games just because now in tournaments you can put in a whole lot of volume just by like playing tournaments, right? Because now you can re-enter and re-enter currently. And I haven't played a ton of cash games recently. What about PLO? I played a lot of PLO in the past, but not much recently. I have a few friends who live in LA and they are cleaning up in PLO currently at the moment. Kevin says you're addicted to pokercoaching.com. Good. It is important to realize, though, that your brain, your subconscious brain, will fall for marketing. It will fall for marketing. And things like casinos and drugs and alcohol is a drug, and cigarettes and all these things are like definitively awful for you. They have done an amazing job of marketing. And you have to realize that all of their marketing is to trick you into putting something into your body that is bad for your body. And and you want to make sure you are not tricked. And your subconscious will get tricked because lots of people's subconscious get tricked. Almost everybody's subconscious gets tricked. And you want to make sure that you don't. So you have to get rid of all the marketing. You have to get rid of that, get that out of your brain, and instead look at things for what they are, what they actually are, right? So anyway. Once I've been sober for a year, we'll talk about that. Currently, had no alcohol for 2.5 weeks. I think I'm not going to drink anymore. Pretty sure I'm going to drink never again. I read a book called This Naked Mind. And it really does exactly what I just said. It loads your subconscious full of logic. Like, for example, why would you be drinking something that is a poison to your brain? You wake up and your brain doesn't work. You have hangovers, you throw up, etc., etc., etc. Why would you do all of these things to your body voluntarily? Because I have fun. But do you really have more fun drinking than when you don't? Or do you just think you do? Anyway, I think I was drinking too much. Where is the book? Did I lose the book somewhere? Oh, no, that's not it. Oh, here it is. honestly, I was drinking too much. I got this book. One of my poker playing friends recommended it to me. He also stopped drinking, who was drinking too much. And I think it was useful. I'll tell you in a year. I didn't really plan on talking about this, but it came up. Maybe gambling addiction is going to come up in general. And this process here, works with all addictions. Kevin says moderation. Yeah, the problem is moderation doesn't really work for a lot of people. Certainly doesn't work for me. If you all know me, I go off. How many bullets should you have in a multi-tournament with unlimited buy-ins? It's not really a great question. Instead, you want to be asking, is it profitable to buy into the tournament at this point? If it is profitable to buy into a tournament at this point, if it's profitable to buy into the tournament at this point, then you can just get in it, right? Let's see. Sex is way better without beer and drinks. So the book actually discusses, some people say, oh, I get to have better sex when I'm drinking. And it says that, you'll find that 2 people sober have good sex. 2 people drunk have marginal sex. 1 person drunk, 1 person sober have terrible sex. It's probably true. Anyway. David says he's been sober for 1.5 years and won't go back. Yeah, I don't really have a desire either. Also, it's important to realize, I'm in a mind sport, right? I'm in a game. Is it sport? Don't know if it's a sport or not. I'm in a game where your brain is relevant. Your brain is important, right? And you want whatever edge you can have. And if you look at any top performer in the world, at anything, the vast majority of them are super, super, super regimented, serious, etc. And I've not been. I've been a little bit lax, and that's not good. So I have to get my act together. To be fair, I have my act together way more than the vast majority of people, but I don't have my act together better than the absolute top performers, and I recognize that. Not to mention wasted money. The book said that heavy drinkers spend about $400,000 in their lifetime on alcohol. So that's fun. All right, look. I don't have a problem with any vices. I think that you should be able to do kind of whatever you want to. That said, I want to be the best version of myself, and I hope all of you do as well. And if you are the best version of yourself, it's all you really can ask for. You don't feel comfortable wearing glasses in cash games. You should not wear glasses in cash games. Your shirt gives you a significant edge. It probably doesn't. What should you do? Get good at not having physical tells, right? So this book presents things called liminal points. S. Stone Canadian said, cannabis opens the mind and makes you a creative player. That would be a good liminal point for this book. Basically, it's a point that you think is true. Your subconscious tells you that is true. That is just straight up not true. And you just think it's true. A lot of people's subconsciouses trick them into doing things that are just not good for them. Fortunately, I've only been... the only thing I've really ever been addicted to, I think, is alcohol. And I think I've killed it. So good. How do you go about recognizing your own physical tells? Realize how you look, how you feel when you play. Are you blinking a lot whenever you have the nuts? Are you breathing heavily when you have a specific type of hand? Etc., etc. Current vice is caffeine. Yeah, caffeine's, of the things you can be addicted to, seems like one of the better ones. And to be fair, addicted to caffeine, I don't even know what addicted to caffeine means. I don't feel like I'm addicted to caffeine. I have, a cup of coffee a day and a bunch of tea. So maybe I am addicted to caffeine. But hey, that's okay. I'll be all right. All right, have a great day. Enjoy yourselves. Have fun. Have a great day. Strive to be the best version of yourself. And there's never a better time to start bettering yourself than right this minute, because then you'll make the most of the rest of your time. How long have I been playing poker? 16 years. How long did it for me to take it seriously as a full-time pro? 1 year. Have fun. Enjoy yourselves. I wish all of you the best of luck. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.